Welcome. Oh, okay, we have to have a Megillat here?
Take a chumash.
Yeah.
Take a chumash.
I don't know where anything is here. I don't even know how to get up. Which chumash is that out there?
A regular chumash.
Okay, just show what I don't know. Okay,
You still speak English?
I don't speak Hebrew, so
No.
I don't speak English. Okay.
See.
2 seconds and we'll start.
What page are we on?
452.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm about ready to start a shiur. Okay. 11:45. A quarter to. Okay. Okay. Bye. Bye. Okay. We're getting there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Good. It means that's working. This little device is the speaker. Okay, we are on. Why isn't it telling me that it's? Is it? We're back to that again. Yeah, it's recording. I think so. Okay.
Okay.
I think so. It should tell me that it stopped. Are you sure you want to stop recording? Okay. Esther, Megillat Esther, Perek Ches. If you have a art scroll, it's 1258. And in typical fashion, there are a lot of people online. Okay. Okay, let's begin. Let's read the text. Perek Ches. We should familiarize ourselves with the text itself, and then we'll come back and we will see what Rabbi Soloveitchik has to say about this very important chapter in the story. Bayomahu nasan hamelech Achashverosh Haman tzarer haYehudim uMordechai ba lifnei hamelech ki gida Esther ma hula. That very day, King Achashverosh gave the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, to Queen Esther, and Mordechai presented himself to the king, for Esther had revealed his relationship to her. So now Achashverosh knows who Mordechai is and his relationship to Esther. Vayasar hamelech es tabato asher hevir meHaman vayitno leMordechai, and the king slipped off this which had been removed from Haman and gave it to Mordechai. Vatosam Esther as Mordechai al beis Haman. Esther put Mordechai in charge of Haman's estate. Vatosef Esther vatidaber lifnei hamelech vatipol lifnei raglov vatef vatischanein lo lavir es haras Haman ha'agagiv es machshavto asher choshav al haYehudim. Then something happens. Esther, so all wonderful, right? Mordechai is now part of the situation. He's standing in front of Achashverosh. He receives the estate of Haman, but then something happens in Perek Gimel. In Pasuk Gimel, Esther yet again spoke to the king. This time she collapsed at his feet, and she cried and begged him to avert the evil intention of Haman the Agagite and his scheme which he had plotted against the Jews. Pasuk Dalet. Vayoshet hamelech leEsther es sharvit hazav vatokem Esther vatamod lifnei hamelech. The king extended the gold scepter to Esther, and Esther arose and stood before the king. Remember, she did this without permission, so she's now getting the permission. Vatomer im al hamelech tov v'im matzasi chen lefanav v'chasher hadaver lifnei hamelech v'tova anim beinov yikosev la shivas has. Farim machshevas Haman ben Hamadasa Gagi Asher Kosav LaAbeit Es HaYudim Asher B'chol Midinot HaMelech. She said, if it pleases the king, and if I've won favor in his eyes, and the proposal seems proper in the king's opinion, and I am pleasing to him, let a decree be written to countermand those dispatches devised by Haman, the son of Hamidata Hagagi. He wrote, ordering the destruction of the Jews are all in the king's provinces. For how can I bear to witness the disaster which will befall my people? How can I bear to witness the destruction of my relatives? Vayomer HaMelech HaChashverosh Lester HaMalka LeMordechai HaYehudi Hinei Beis Hamon Asati Lester V'oto Talu Al Oetz Al Asher Shalach Yodo BaYehudim. Then King Ahasuerus answered to Queen Esther, and she said, and to Mordecai, and he said, behold, I have given Haman's estate to Esther, and he has been hung, right, on the gallows because he plotted against the Jews. Vatem kisu al hayudim katov beinechem b'shem hamelech v'chisamu b'tabat hamelech ki chesav asher nichtav b'shem hamelech v'nachtom b'tabas hamelech ein lo hashiv. You may write concerning the Jews whatever you desire in the king's name and seal it with the royal signet. For an edict which is written in the king's name and sealed with the royal king's name may not be revoked. Vayikaru sofrei hamelech ba'is hahi b'chodesh hashlishi b'chodesh Sivan b'shlosha v'esrim bon vayikosev k'chol asher tzivan Mordechai al hayudim v'al hashdarpinim v'apachos v'sorei hamedinos Hashem eldu v'atku sheva v'esrim v'meo medina kichsava v'am kilshano v'el hayudim kichsavam. So the king's secretaries were summoned at that time on the 23rd day of the 3rd month, that is the month of Sivan. And it was written exactly as Mordechai had dictated to the Jews and to this, whatever this is, to the governors and the officials of the provinces from Hodu to Cush, 127 provinces, to each province in its own script, and each people in its own language, and to the Jews in their own script and language. Vayichtov b'shem hamelech Achashverosh vayachtom b'tabat hamelech vayishalach svarim biyad haratzim basusim v'rochvei harechesh hachashtarnim b'nei haramachim. And he wrote in the name of King Achashverosh and sealed it with the king's signet. He sent letters by couriers on horseback, riders to swift rulers, riders of swift mules, bred of mares. As kol chel am umedina hatzarim otam tafin nashim ushlolam lavos, to the effect that the king had permitted the Jews of every single city to organize and to defend themselves, to destroy, to slay, to exterminate every armed force of any people of province that threatened them, along with their children and women, and to plunder their possessions. On a single day in all of the provinces of King Ahasuerus, namely upon the 13th day of the 12th month, that is the month of Adar. That becomes what, of course? Tanis Esther, right? Shegen haksovli nasein dos b'chol medina galui v'chol amim liyos hayudim asidim layom hazeh liyinakem me'oiveihem. The contents of the document were to be promulgated in every province and to be published to all the peoples, so that the Jews may be ready on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. The couriers and the riders of the swift mules went forth in urgent haste by the order of the king, and the edict was distributed in Shushan, the capital. Now Mordechai left the king's presence clad in royal apparel and turquoise and white with a large gold crown and a robe of fine linen and purple. Then the city of Shushan was all cheerful and glad. The Jews had light, they had gladness, joy, and honor. The likewise, in every province, in every city, wherever the king's command and his decree reached the Jews, they had gladness and joy, a feast and a holiday. They made a Yom Tov out of this. Moreover, many from among the people of the land professed themselves to be Jewish. Suddenly we had a lot of converts. Why? For the fear of the Jews had fallen upon them. People joined the Jewish nation. That's Perek Ches. So if I would ask you to summarize in your own words, Perek Ches, we won. Victory. The war is over. Haman is defeated. Esther introduces Mordechai to Achashverosh at the very beginning of the Perek. All great, all wonderful, all fantastic. But that's not the way Rabbi Soloveitchik reads this chapter. Rabbi Soloveitchik, God bless you, Rabbi Soloveitchik reads it very carefully. He demonstrates that Esther is reminding us if you read this chapter very carefully, that although Haman was defeated, and we have a wonderful holiday called Purim, when next will the next Haman surface? And that's a worry in this chapter. We don't know. And we must always remember that there might be a Haman, there is going to be a Haman waiting for us around the corner. And we'll see this reflected in interesting halachot pertaining to Purim as well. And so that's the way the Rav understands this chapter. Let me show you what he says. He says, we never know when it will happen again. That's what this chapter is all about. When you read this chapter quickly, as we just did, it sounds great. Hey, we got Purim, we got everything wonderful, all happy, and Givaltic, right? There's another part of the story that Esther is teaching us as well, and it's crucial. Don't think that this victory is the way it's going to be all the time, and it's not going to be. There's always another Haman waiting and lurking around the corner. Take a look at Pasuk Gimel. The Rav notes. What happened there? Remember, we said, whoa, first Mordechai is introduced and to Achashverosh, and Achashverosh hands him in Perek Ches, Pasuk Aleph, Pasuk Beis, the ring of the estate of Haman. It sounds all lovely. But then what happened? Vatosef Esther v'tedaber lifnei hamelech vatipol lifnei raglov. Suddenly, after Mordechai is introduced to Haman, to Achashverosh, and Achashverosh hands him the key from Haman, right? It sounds all great. Something happens in Pasuk Gimel. Vatosef Esther. What does Vatosef mean? Something added. Oh, stop the story for a second, because something else, there's another story taking place. Are you following what the literature here, the text itself, is teaching you two different layers of a story. Vatosef Esther, vatidaber lifnei hamelech, and then what does she do? Vatipol lifnei raglov. She falls down. Is this the way a queen would act? Vatef, she cries. Vatitchanen lo. What's titchanen? That's tachanun. She pleads, right? She's afraid. It's not over yet, right? And the fact that Esther had to plead for the survival even after Haman was dead. And isn't that what Achashverosh responds to her? He's gone. We hung him already. What are you worried about? She's worried. It reminds us that the story isn't a permanent victory, Rabbi Soloveitchik notes. The truth is that Purim's message is another word. You know what Purim's message is? Instability. Instability of Jewish destiny. And this, the Rav noted, is reflected in two halachot. Fascinating two halachot. The first citation that the Rav refers to is the famous discussion in Masechtas Megillah, Daf Yud Daled Amud Aleph, where the Gemara wonders, Purim is a funny holiday. What's missing on Purim that we have on Pesach and we have on Hanukkah? Hallel. We have no Hallel on Purim. There is no Hallel. We don't sing Hallel at all. And the Gemara wonders, that's a very famous Gemara, Yudalad Amud Aleph in Masechtas Megillah. Why isn't there Hallel on Purim? Why don't we say Hallel on Purim? What's the Gemara bothered by? We've had other holidays that we celebrate victories. Name them to me. Okay, that would be the second. Let's do biblical. Pesach. And do we have Hallel on Pesach? Of course we have Hallel. And what happened on Pesach? It was a victory against an enemy. Now talk about Hanukkah. Hanukkah, a victory against an enemy, right? Yavan, okay? We celebrate it with Hallel. On Hanukkah, we even celebrate it all 8 days with on Pesach, we don't. We only do Hallel Yom Rishon, if you're in Eretz Yisrael, the first 2 days, if you're in Chutz La'aretz, right? We do a full Hallel. The rest of Pesach, what do? Chatzi Hallel. Okay, we're not going to get into that, but there's a Hallel. There is no Hallel on Purim. And the Gemara wonders why. And the Gemara is going to offer us numerous answers. The Talmud suggests the following. The first answer, Rava said, Rav Amar, Bishlama Hasam, Hallelu Avdei Hashem, V'lo Avdei Paro. He said, Rava said, Hallel is not recited on Purim. Why not? Granted that Hallel is said on Pesach, the Gemara says, when recalling the Exodus from Egypt. As after the salvation there, they could recite in Hallel, Hallelu Avdei Hashem, give praise to your servant God, right? After their servitude of Paro ends, who are we servants to? Hashem. We could honestly say that then. But the Gemara says, V'lo Elohacha, be here. What do you mean here? On Purim, Hallelu Avdei Hashem, can you say that you're now servants only to God? No. Why? Because V'lo Avdei Achashverosh, Achashverosh is still there. We're not solely servants to God. We still are servants to Achashverosh. Therefore, Hakati Avdei Achashverosh Anan. Since we are still servants to Achashverosh, can we honestly say Hallel? We can't say a full Hallel. By Pesach, we get it. He explains the Gemara in the Rav notes, and I quote the Rav. What happened on Purim was not of a permanent nature. They were saved. Of course they were saved. However, no one could guarantee that tomorrow the same story would not repeat itself. And that is why there's no Hallel on Purim. Because Hallel on Purim doesn't meet the demand of a sense of security that we're Avdei Hashem only. We're not Avdei Hashem only. When Paro is wiped out, what happens? He's gone. He's gone, right? They're gone in Yam Suf. We can say, Hallelu Avdei Hashem. Purim is not like that. When Yavan's destroyed, Yavan's gone. We can sing, Hallelu Avdei Hashem, but not by Paro. And the Rav continued to analyze this Gemara, because the Gemara then gives another reason. Rav Nachman says, Kiriyasa zo halela. Rav Nachman says an alternative answer. He says, you know why we don't say Hallel? We do say Hallel, but it's not called Hallel. It's called Megillat Esther. Megillat Esther replaces Hallel. What is that? Megillat Esther replaces Hallel and the words of the Rav. But surely the Rav asks a great question. On Pesach, do we have a Kriyas HaTorah? We have a Kriyas HaTorah on Pesach. We read Haggadah, we have Haggadah, but we have on Pesach morning, we have a Kriyas HaTorah straight from Exodus, right? Why don't we say that the reading of the story from the Torah is Hallel? Why are you davening Hallel on Pesach morning? You have a Kriyas HaTorah, it's Hallel, right? Right, true, but on Pesach, what are you reading? The story of Pesach. Say Kriyasa Zu Halela. Say, hey, we don't need Hallel this morning. It's Pesach morning. We don't need Hallel this morning. We're going to read the Kriya. The answer is that the Megillah has an additional special message, the Rav writes. It is a story of triumph and salvation, but it's also a book of Jewish tragedy and peculiar Jewish destiny. It is a book of Jewish insecurity. And the Rav then quotes our pasuk, Vatosef Esther v'tadaber lifnei hamelech v'tipol lifnei raglov v'teif v'tischanein lo. It's proven, he says, there it is. Then Esther spoke to the king again, falling down at his feet, weeping and pleading with him to overturn the wickedness of Haman Agagite, the plot that he had thought up against the Jews. And she said, if it so pleases the king, and if I found favor in his eyes, it seems right there, the king and I have to be pleasing, right? We have to be pleasing to the king. This is not, Rabbi Soloveitchik writes, the way Moshe addressed Paro. He didn't beg Paro anything. This was not the way the Jews acted during their sojourn in the land of Israel when they composed an independent commonwealth. But in Shushan, it does. In Shushan, there's an insecurity. The Rav underscores in his analysis of Purim that it's a story, yes, of Jewish. On one hand, it's also a story of Jewish insecurity. We are darn worried that we're going to have another October 7th. That is correct. That is correct. Because of this, the Rav notes, we can appreciate something that we certainly shouldn't take considering it. We should not take it lightly, and we shouldn't think it's so strange, but we're going to think it's so strange. He teaches us another halacha. And we're going to say, this is what they did on Purim, but now you'll understand the brilliance of this halacha. Rav Amron Gon. Who's Rav Amron Gon? Rav Amron Gon is one of the earliest sources we have for our Sidur. for the way we daven every day. Our liturgy comes from Rav Amram Gaon. He's one of the first. Rav Amram Gaon is 1,300 years ago. He's in Bavel, right? Rav Amram Gaon wrote a work called Seder Rav Amram Gaon in volume 2, chapter 72, and it's quoted by the Tur Shulchan Aruch. Rav Amram Gaon says, you know how we celebrated Purim in Bavel? It's pretty close to where Purim happened. You know where we celebrated Purim in Bavel? We said Tachanun on Purim morning. Tachanun? Tachanun is never said on a holiday. How could and the Tur Rav Amram Gaon and Rabbi Soloveitchik says, it's amazing. We see this and we go, huh? We never say Tachanun on a Yom Tov. It's the antithesis of a Yom Tov. We never mention Tachanun on a Yom Tov. If it's a Yom Tov, we know Rosh Chodesh, any Yom Tov, right? Tu B'Shvat, we don't say Tachanun. Tu B'Av, we don't say Tachanun. On Purim, they said Tachanun. Doesn't make sense. What is going on here? And Rav Seder, Rav Amram Gaon, remember, he's one of our first major sources on how we know what to daven in the shul. The Rav explained that if one appreciates what Purim is all about, then they're not shocked at all what they did in Bavel. It's a limited victory. Purim is a limited victory. It was a victory over our enemies, yes, but it's also Jewish insecurity, worrying that this might happen all over again. And that is what the yeshivot of the Gaonim understood, and they lived through it. They're in Bavel. They're right there. And they said, 1 second, we just can't take this day as a celebration. Wow, we're victorious. We won the war, right? In the words of the Rav, we rejoice in the miracle that took place, and we pray that God will continue to guard and to protect us from our enemies. There's not only one Haman. There are many more rising up against us. That's exactly the theme of Purim. And the Rav notes that this is an appreciation of what Purim is all about that can also shed light on another discussion in the Gemara. He all from this parak in Esther says, I'm seeing the insecurity in big letters, understanding what this is all about. And I can understand how Chazal responded to this throughout Shas. In particular, there's another debate in the Gemara, and it doesn't make sense to us when we hear the debate. The Gemara in Yud Tes Amud Aleph in Megillah. Chazal, the sages of the Talmud, debated how much of the Megillah do you have to hear to be Yotzei, to fulfill the mitzvah of hearing Megillah? Huh? What kind of question is that? Honestly, how much? Yeah, right. What's the question? The Gemara wants to know how much of the Megillah, if you only heard this amount, are you Yotzei? If you only heard this amount, are you Yotzei? And it wants to know what part of the Megillah, really what they're asking is, what part of the Megillah is essential to hear? All of it. That's the way you and I paskin. But that's not what the Gemara is asking. So now you have to ask yourself when you learn a Gemara like that, what is the Gemara really mean? What is this debate? And it's a major debate in the Gemara. If you open up, the Rav explained that the Megillah is just, it's right. If the Megillah is just a story of Hallel, remember one of the answers was, why don't we have Hallel? We have Megillah, right? If Megillah is a replacement for Hallel, that turns Megillah into what? Right? If Megillah is Hallel, to celebrate the victory over Haman, we're going to have Megillah in place of Hallel. Then the story should begin where? If Megillah replaces Hallel, where should the story begin? And the Rav notes it should begin at chapter 6, Perek Vav. What happens in chapter 6? The king couldn't sleep that night. Why is that the chapter where you would say, hey, if it's Hallel, it begins there? Because at that point of the story begins the downfall of Haman, right? He's defeated. That's Jewish fortune suddenly surfaces. If that's the story, then what should happen then if that's the story? Then that's where it should all start, the Rav notes, right? And the Rav writes the following. The Rav says, hey, that's what the Gemara means. Let's start with Perek Vav, if it's Hallel. But the Gemara then offers a dissenting opinion and suggests earlier places in the Megillah, because they realize what? That Purim is not just a Hallel. Megillah is not just a Hallel. It's not just a story of Jewish triumphalism, a book of despair and human insecurity and Jewish instability. That's what's happening. And that's why the Gemara asks, tell me, what's the essence of this book? Where do you have to hear the story? Yes, we Muskin, you have to hear the whole story. But they were asking, tell me what's the essence? What's the real message of this book, right? And the rabbis debated. The rabbis were really debating because they realized that this book is a very complicated book. It seems so simple, right? It seems so easy to listen to the Megillah. It's a beautiful little story that we've heard all of our lives, and we celebrate it, and we get all dressed up, and we make noise, and for Haman, etc. It's a beautiful story. The Gemara is telling you, you're misreading it. If you think it's such a simple, beautiful story, you don't understand the real story, right? So the Rav notes right away in this pasuk, in pasuk Gimel, that there's another message being taught to us: the instability, the insecurity of the Jewish people, because we're afraid another Haman could be around the corner. Take a look now. The Rav jumps to pasuk Vav. What does the Vav say? And this is one of the psukim that we read in what tune? Eicha. Suddenly, Dr. Mark on Purim night and on Purim day is going to read how it's going to be read to Eicha. What do you think is happening? Why are we reading it to Eicha? The insecurity of the Jew. That's where that tradition. There are a number of psukim in Megillat Esther that suddenly it's not sung to the tune of Megillat Esther. Suddenly the Baal Koreh switches to Megillat Eicha Tisha B'Av. What does that remind you of? The question that they did in Bava, right? Tachanu. Now it doesn't sound like so stupid after all. We still have a bit of that custom. No, we're not going to say Tachanu, that you don't say Tachanu on Purim. But a shmek of it, if you will, is still there in this tradition that there are psukim in the Megillah that we're going to sing to Eicha. And what is this? Eicha uchal v'ra'isi bara. How can I live? Who's speaking? Esther is speaking to whom? Achashverosh. And she says, she's begging him, we have to destroy Haman's edict, right? We have to revoke Haman's edict. We have to let the Jews defend themselves. And she says to the king, Ki eichecha uchal v'ra'isi bara asher yimotzes ami. Ve'eichecha uchal v'ra'isi ba'avdan moladati. For how can I see or bear? That's how it's translated here. But v'ra'isi means, how can I see, witness the disaster which will befall my people? How can I witness the destruction of my relatives? What in the world is going on? What does she mean? How can I see the evil? Was she only worried about her own experience? How can I? What was she saying? How can I see? Was she so worried about her own emotions? Am I worried about my own emotions that I watched a funeral in Eretz Israel? I'm only worried about me? Is that what you're saying? How can I stand here and watch this funeral like today? Today is such a sad day. I have to worry about my emotions? Is that what she's saying? It sure sounds it. Says you don't understand the word v'ra'isi. I know what the word v'ra'isi is. Nar ha'isi, continue the pasuk. The gamsa, the same words. V'lo ra'isi. V'lo ra'isi, that's the same words here, right? Gamsa kanti v'lo ra'isi. Translate the words. Nar ha'isi v'gamsa kanti. I was young and I'm now old. Nar ha'isi v'gamsa kanti. I once was young, now I'm old. V'lo ra'isi, and I did not see a righteous man be forsaken. First of all, it's not true. Do we see righteous people suffer? We do. We do the Odyssey. We see all the time. So what does that mean? So Rav Soloveitchik says V'lo ra'isi doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean eyesight. It doesn't mean bear a witness. V'lo ra'isi, I stood and watched and didn't do anything. I stood and watched the funeral and wasn't determined that I am not going to allow this to happen again. That's v'lo ra'isi. That's our feeling. I emotionally feel what I think. Esther wasn't saying to Achashverosh, what a brilliant way to understand. Read it again. Understand me, Achashverosh. I am not going to stand here and not do something. I am not going to, while my people are going to be affected in an evil way. And if you think I'm going to stand here, as my people are destroyed, you got the wrong lady. That's not what's going to happen. That's what she was saying. She was flexing muscle, if you will. And that's a totally different way to understand this pasuk. She was telling Achashverosh to not possibly allow anything to happen to her people. She could not stand aside and let evil strike without her trying to stop it. And that's exactly what she does in this pasuk, right? This is because she realizes we are an insecure people. Okay, but then, so we read the whole pasuk and we say that, and what happened? Read the whole parak, and what happens? So Achashverosh allows them to sign a new dictate. Do whatever you want. You want to write a document that the people of the Jewish people are to defend themselves, and Haman's edict is gone. I'll sign it. You send it all over, right? That's what happens. So now jump to the ultimate pasuk, right? There are 4 psukim in Esther that the Baal Koreh stops and we say out loud, and then he says it, right? Here are 2 of them, 2 of the 4. Mordechai Yotza, pasuk Tesvav. Mordechai Yotza, mifnei HaMelech levush malchus tches. V'churva teres zahav gedolav v'tachlich butz v'argaman v'ir Shushan zahalav v'samecha. And the city of Shushan was cheerful and glad. They threw a party, right? Shushan threw a party because we went and we were able to conquer our enemies. So we've been given permission. But what happens? Mordechai Yotza. Mordechai, who is this Mordechai? This verse offers the Rav an opportunity to discuss a crucial question pertaining to how you understand history in its most basic fundamental way. This verse offers the opportunity to discuss how does Judaism view the historic figures that are transformative in our history? Is the individual glorified? Like, for instance, the 19th century Scottish, the Rav quotes him, the 19th century Scottish philosopher, Thomas Carlyle. Thomas Carlyle is a very important philosopher that affects Western thinking in the 19th century. And Carlyle believed that the individual represents a glorified personality. In other words, what's history? It's all about individuals. Is history about the people and individuals had an impact on it? Or is history about specific individuals? Is it the story of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Moshe, Aaron? Go through history and you'll pick out it's really their story. It's no, and the minor, the tafel is what? That's Carlyle's approach. It's glorified the individual, or no. The Megillah is telling us a totally different story. And the Rav notes that when the story of Purim unfolded, his picture of Mordechai, if you had to paint your own picture of Mordechai, what would the picture look like? I'll tell you what the Rav would be. But what would you look like? Okay, robes, but what do you have to do something else? Is he young?
No.
Old?
Medium.
Medium. He's middle-aged. The Rav thinks he's old. He's an old man. He's an old man. Mordechai is an old man. And he said he's not a young man. He's probably an elderly man when all of this happened. He calculates historically, it's probably on in age, on in years. And not only that, he wasn't even well known. He was an anonymous figure, as the Rav puts it. He was a son of poor immigrants. That's what, of course he was. He was a son of poor immigrants. Why was he a son of poor immigrants? Where were they coming from? That's correct.
They were refugees.
They're refugees from the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. Correct? They're poor immigrants who lived a life of anonymity. Who knows the poor immigrant child? Who knows the poor immigrant old man? Nobody paid attention to this man. All changed, he said, when the decree was declared. Community was destined to be destroyed by Haman's edict. Suddenly, this old man cried, and everybody in the world heard those tears. Everybody. He didn't just cry a cry of his home. It was a bitter cry out loud, and with him. All of Shushan cried with Mordechai. Suddenly, Mordechai became the major figure, right? So now, when we read this pasuk, then we see Mordechai and wearing a crown, right? Shushan, he's walking in the cities of Shushan now, looking beautiful. The whole city rejoices with him. The whole city cried with him. Now the whole city rejoices with them. Why? Is this because Mordechai represents Mordechai, or is this because Mordechai represents Klal Yisrael? He becomes the representative of the people. It's not like Carlyle suggested. Thomas Carlyle suggests that the historic figure is to be elevated to a crucial, right? To a crucial level. He's to be idolized, not Judaism. Judaism doesn't idolize the individual. Rather, the individual leader becomes the representative of the Jewish people. And that's, by the way, from the dawn of our people, our avos. What did they become? Representatives of our people. Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah are all representatives of the Jewish people. It's true always throughout the Jewish history that we were never allowed a glorification of the individual. Never allowed. He did not. Where was he buried? Where was he buried? Why not? Where is
They didn't want to make it.
not to compare whatsoever? Please don't. Excuse me. What are they doing with this Hezbollah Yamach Shemainik? Right? Did that ever happen to Moshe? No. No. And we never made a hero or demigod, God out of a great man. Never. That's why we, unlike Christianity, could not understand. We battle against Christianity on a philosophical level. How can you take a human being and make him a God? It's just so antithetical to Judaism. And the truth is, by the way, not, again, pause on that thought, okay? That thought I've meant. But the truth is, historically, why were the Litvaks so opposed to Hasidus? The major concern, the glorification of a human being, the Rebbe. What did the Rebbe come in Hasidic thought? The Rebbe came called, what do they call the Rebbe? In Hasidic literature, the tzaddik. In other words, he can do no, you're right. There's a Pope kind of aura, a vibe, and that bothered the Litvaks to no end. You know, I always tell you, Rabbi Soloveitchik, the story of Rabbi Soloveitchik, and now you'll really tend to appreciate it much more. Rabbi Soloveitchik used to give a shiur on Saturday night, a very famous shiur. Hundreds and hundreds would come in Boston, men, women, to hear his Chumash shiur on Saturday nights. Very famous. And that's when he gave his shiur. And again, I mean, all over the Boston area, they would come. And so a lady waits for him, and he finishes the shiur, and she comes over to him, and she says, Rabbi Soloveitchik, can you please give me a bracha? And Rabbi Soloveitchik says, the story goes, Rabbi Soloveitchik says, why? Are you an apple? He was a Litvak of Litvaks. He was a Soloveitchik. But what did he mean? I mean, of course you can give it. The Rav gave brachos. Trust me, a bracha. You should be matzliach. He told every bar and bar, every student in Maimonides that you should have success. Please, what does he mean? He mean now you can. It's correct. I'm an agent of God. That's all I am. I'm a represent as she is. That's correct. That's what a Litvak would say. You need tefillos. What are you supposed to do? You daven, and I'll also daven. But you got to daven. I'm your place. The Rebbe would take the place. And that's the Litvaks. Really, now you understand it from this perspective. They couldn't tolerate it. Mordechai, right, it becomes a glorified deity? Not at all. Not at all. At the very end, the shortest parak is the last parak, right? And Mordechai was loved by everybody? No. It clearly says, and Chazal pick up on it, Rove, a majority of the people voted. Mordechai, who saved their lives, only a majority. He never got 100%. That's correct. I get 100%. My father, with the Zichrono Livracha, would always tell me, if I share with my father problems in the Rabbanos, so my father would say, and you're better than Moshe? Who do you think you are? Who do you think you are? What are you complaining about? What's the complaint? He would always tell me that. That was his line. You have a complaint? You have no complaints. You're a manid, you're a rabbi, be a rabbi. You're following Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't have it easy either. You're not having it easy either. That's right, teacher Moshe. And that's the Rav understood that here we're being taught in this parak, the approach to, you see, the Rav reads these psukim, not just as a story, but what he can literally flesh out from the psukim way beyond, right? What it really means from a Jewish perspective. And the Rav says, we've never made a hero or a demigod God out of a great man. And the Rav, that's why Chazal say, Yaakov lo mace, Moshe lo mace, David Melech Yisrael chai v'kayim. It wasn't they. What did they represent? Yaakov lo mace. What do you mean Yaakov lo mace? He's gone. He's buried in Marasa Machpelah. Moshe is buried somewhere. We know the Torah tells us Hashem buried him. He's dead. We haven't seen Moshe walking around the neighborhood lately, right? David died. No, David Melech Yisrael chai v'kayim. When we say it, now we sing it. We say, you know, when we say it, Kiddush Levana. That's one of the passages that, and we say it 3 times. Why are we saying David Melech Yisrael chai v'kayim? David Melech Yisrael chai v'kayim. Why? Because what is Kiddush Levana all about? The Jewish history we're going to renew. That's right. But we're going to wane and come back, and wane and come back, and wane and come back. And what does David Melech Yisrael chai v'kayim mean? Jewish history is Netzach Yisrael lo yishaker. The eternity of the Jewish people is not falsehood. And I read to you the words of the Rav. These divine belonged to the people, and the people belonged to them. Their love was boundless. Their thoughts encompassed dimensions of time. The individual becomes the abode of the millions. It's not celebrating the individual. Mordechai is not celebrated. Jewish eternity that is celebrated through Mordechai. Mordechai and Esther represent. One last point in this chapter, all fleshed out from this chapter. Take a look at Pasuk Yud Zayin. So Mordechai goes out in the city and he's dressed all in royal, and everybody celebrates, right? Take a look at Pasuk Yud Zayin. You're going to see something fascinating here that until the Rav notes it, you won't note it. If you read the story, you won't note it. But you're going to see the evolution of halacha, the evolution of how this holiday Purim became the way we celebrate it. Pay attention. V'chol medina, v'chol ir ve'ir, mekom asher dvar hamelech v'daso magia simcha, V'sason la'Yehudim mishteh. What's the next words? V'yom tov. V'rabim me'amei aretz misyahadim, and many non-Jews joined our ranks. Ki nafal pachad haYehudim aleim, because the Jews have the upper hand. We better join. The Jews are going, or they're going to. But what kind of day was this? In every suburb, right? In every province, Michol ir ve'ir, in every city, wherever the edict arrived, right? The Jews had gladness and joy. And what did they declare this day? A Yom Tov. A Yom Tov. What does that mean? What does that mean, halacha? I know what the Yom Tov means. If I tell you today is a Yom Tov, define it for me halachically. Halachically. There's something else. Halachically. Oh, Malach becomes asur on a Yom Tov. A Yom Tov is defined halachically by Isur Melacha. Isur Melacha. You don't have a Yom Tov. That's why I never say on Hanukkah or on Purim, good Yom Tov, right? Is a Chag Sameach. Chag Sameach is the wrong greeting on Purim. It's the wrong greeting on Hanukkah. What is Hanukkah Sameach? Purim Sameach, Yom Ha'atzmaut Sameach. It doesn't have, it's not a Chag, because halachically, I know what a Chag is. Halachically, a Yom Tov has to have an Easter. So that's question one. What does it mean when it said Yom Tov? Question number two, the Rav asks. On this pasuk, the Rav asks, what about Purim night? I know what Yom Tov is at night and day. It's a 24-hour expression of celebration. What about Purim night? The night that we read the Megillah, does it have the same halacha as the day? Well, you know the answer to that, but it was an evolution of halacha. At this juncture, what would you think in this pasuk? It's Yom Tov, Mishteh Yom Tov. What did Mordechai want? Okay, this is what the Rav points out. What did Mordechai want? The Rav quotes the Shulchan Aruch, the last siman in Aruch Chaim, Purim, 696, 1. That's in English, if you're looking for the Shulchan Aruch, all the way at the end. It codifies that the prohibition of melacha is it prohibited to work on Purim? No, not at all. It depends on the custom established. The halacha says it depends on the custom established by every community. If our community would announce, we're saying Isur Melacha, then everybody would have to follow, right? If a community prohibited Melacha, the halacha says, then you have to follow. You walk into that community, you have to follow the minig hamakom, the minig of the community, right? But if the community says it's permitted to work, then you can work. The Gemara Megillah, Hey Amid Base, 5b, recounts a fascinating story. Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, the redactor of the Mishnah, you know what he did on Purim? The Gemara says he planted a sapling. A sapling. So he's demonstrating that malacha is permitted, correct? The Talmud wonders, however, that because in chapter 9, take a look in verse, the next chapter, Perek Tes, Pasuk Yud Zayin, take a look on page 1260. B'yom 13 l'chodesh Adar v'noach b'arba asar yom v'oso yom. What does it say? Mish simcha. What did they do? What's missing here?
Yom Tov.
Oh, Yom Tov is here on our chapter, which is chapter 8, but chapter when the holiday is really established, the word Yom Tov is missing. It says Yom Mishteh V'Simcha, thinking a celebration. Ooh, wow. So, okay, it indicates that although our pasuk said Yom Tov, an evolution of halacha occurred when it came to how we celebrate Purim. Originally, what do you think in our pasuk? What did Mordechai want? That's correct. And what happened? The people pushed back. They said, no, we're not ready to celebrate a holiday that is Isur Melacha. That's correct. The Jews did not accept what Mordechai wanted to establish. You see it right here in chapter 8, a Yom Tov. What therefore happened? was that it was left to each community. If you want a Yom Tov, you can have a Yom Tov. If you don't want a Yom Tov, you don't have to have a Yom Tov. There's going to be celebrations. There's going to be certain things that are required on Purim. And we know the halachas. There has to be a Suda. There has to be, right, Mishteh, Simcha, Sex, Mikras Megillah, then Matanos Lavyonim and Mishloach Manos. All wonderful, but that's not an Easter of Melacha, so it's not a Yom Tov. Also, although this is how the law evolved, the Gemara still asks about Rabbi. What did he do on Purim? The Gemara says they records that. It records that story, and then the Gemara says, "Oh, tell me that again." What did he do on Purim? Wondering why he would do this. Why would he go out and plant? He had to definitely plant a sapling on Purim. So the Gemara answers, no. Rabbi went out and planted it was a joyous occasion. He planted a sapling to mark this joy. Therefore, it was permitted. What's going on here? So Rav understands this Gemara as indicating that planting a sapling of joy that's going to bring simcha was only permitted once it was established that prohibition of melacha wasn't required, right? If it was required, if it was an Easter melacha, do I care if the sapling is a sapling of joy, or do I care if a sapling of sadness? Who cares? It's an act of melacha, and it would have been, if it was across the board of Yom Tov, he wouldn't have been able to plant anything, correct? So, it was permitted because it was a sampling of joy. What's the Gemara mean? So Rabbi Soloveitchik explains, the evolution of halacha when it came to Purim is that today, Purim is supposed to be what? A day of, fill in the blank, that's correct. So in English, a day of joy. So what are you not supposed to do? Anything that diminishes joy. That is correct. That doesn't mean an Issa Malacha. The evolution of halacha, how we celebrate Purim, is don't do anything that's going to diminish your joy. It's true. You want to increase. So is malacha forbidden? Well, if your malacha is going to decrease your joy, what should you not do on Purim? You should not work. That's right. Clearly, planting a sapling for joy does not conflict with how the evolution of halacha occurred and how we celebrate Purim. That's what the Gemara is telling you. In other words, it started off, if you're now marking it on a paper, right? You would say Mordechai's vision was how to celebrate Purim. A Yom Tov, which means Eser Malacha. And what did the people do? No, we can't do that. We can't take another day off on work. Sorry. I'm not going to my boss and telling her I got another day. I'm just not doing that. I'm not doing that. Sorry. Isn't that by the way, that's typical in Jewish life. We know. Pukhazi, the Gemara says. What do it mean, Pukhazi? Go out, how the people act. Many times we say halacha depends upon Pukhazi. Go out and see how people act. We never created a takana if the people couldn't handle it. And that's what's happening here. Mordechai was so taken. What happened? Of course, Mordechai was taken. He was at the center of the whole evolution of Purim. And Mordechai wanted to say, wow, this is a big day. We really, we dodged the bullet. We dodged the bullet. We could have had an October 7th here back 2,000 plus years ago, right? But we dodged the bullet. So what should we do? Throw a Yom Tov. People said, we agree that you have to make, as Rabbi Soloveitchik said about Yom HaAtzmaut. He said Yom HaAtzmaut is a red day on the calendar. What does he mean? It can't be ignored. Is it a Yom Tov? Rabbi Soloveitchik says, I'm not saying it's a Yom Tov. Yeah, right? It's not a Yom Tov, okay. But it's a day that you have to be Makir Tov to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. 100%. Yom Yerushalayim. A day that you have to be Makir Tov to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because we saw great Nisim. So you can't let the day go unmarked. Yom Tov. And that's exactly what happened. As long as the evolution was, and that's what the Gemara means. Why is it telling us Rebbe planted a sapling and then goes back and says, a sapling of joy? Because it's telling us the evolution of the holiday. This is a holiday of joy. Enjoy it. Do everything that's going to increase, 2 seconds, do everything that's going to increase, sell anything that's going to diminish. Obligation lehalacha. Can you go to work? Yeah, I have to go to work, but I'll still have my mishteh and I will still have my mishlach, but I will do all of the mitzvahs I have to do. Now, the second question that the Rav asked was, what about Purim night? What about Purim night? What is it? How did that? Oh, so is there a mitzvah to celebrate Purim night? And the Rav noted, let's take a look. Pasuk Chav Beis, how did it all evolve? Perek Tes Pasuk Chav Beis, go to page 1261, right? Let's take a look. So everything switched and turned good. It was no longer a sad day, it became a holiday. So what does Yemei mean? The day. What about the night? What about throwing a Suda at night? So the halacha makes it very clear. If you have your Suda on Thursday night, which is Yud Dalet Adar, have you fulfilled your obligation? No way. It's Yemei Mishteh V'Simcha. The Suda must be, usually we have Friday night, we have Yontif night, that's the big Suda, right? We always have on a Yontif, on a Shabbos, Friday, the Suda. We start from night to night, right? Not here. Yemei Mishteh. Yeah, we have an obligation to hear Megillah, but at night, that's the only thing we have. We have no, if you fulfill, can you give your Mishlach Manos at night? No, because Mishlach Manos is part of celebrating the Suda. Can you give Matanos Lev Yonim and fulfill the obligation? No, right? It has to be all done on Yemei Mishteh. So the halacha says, how did it evolve? It became the Purim. Do it at night, you haven't fulfilled your obligation. It has to be a day. Clearly then, the prohibition, the Melacha on Purim was not accepted, right? It's not accepted in every locale, that's for sure. And it was permitted only during the day, right? Where you during the day, you have to do the Seudah, right? Because that's the day, the obligation of got it? That's the evolution. Now, yeah, you had a question.
Feel can take the place of Hallel, because the words of Hallel are Hallel to Hashem. There's no Hashem in the Megillah at all.
Right.
There's no Hallel.
Right.
Hallelu, Ana Hashem, all the different things that are in Hallel, which is a praise of Hashem. You don't have any praise of Hashem, period, in the Megillah. So,
well, it's alluded to. It's alluded to.
Yeah.
Oh, so Chazal say every time you say Ha Melech, who's the Ha Melech?
Hashem.
And you know, by the way, there's a custom of a real expensive Megillah. It's called a Hamelech Megillah. What is Hamelech Megillah? After the first column, because it says Vahi Bimei Achashverosh. So the first column, no, they will start every column in the Megillah with Hamelech, 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 and they write it like that. The Sofer will write Megillah Hamelech. It might be, by the way, it's going to be a longer Megillah because it's an 11 line. Every parchment is 11 lines. It said Hamelech.
Achashverosh, literally in the Megillah, the things that Achashverosh did, they're alluding that it's
HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he's a puppet.
Right.
And who's the puppeteer?
So
Yes.
the point is that, but I have a problem with it only because the Hallel is so reflective of thanks and praise and all these different things that you don't see in the Megillah.
So fine, all good. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not directly mentioned, but you mean you're arguing with Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman said, why don't we have Hallel? Because we have Megillah, and Megillah is no Hallel. So you'll say, no, it's not. Okay, that will be your rejection of his thinking.
Right.
And he would respond, you're only reading it superficially. You have to understand what this book is really about. And the truth is, Hallel is not only a celebratory song. Lo hamesim ya'aleluka. Right? There's a lot of Ono Hashem. What's Ono Hashem? You're begging HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? Okay. Hallel is a fascinating.
I also say that because Purim took place outside.
That's another one. That's the Gemara. That's the same Gemara. The Gemara gives, I think, 4 different answers. Why isn't Hallel said on Purim? One of them is because of Chutz La'aretz. One of them is because what we just said, right? Okay.
Well, you say Hallel and Shavuos, don't you?
You do.
But Matan Torah was also outside.
I bet it was Matan Torah. It was all Shalosh Regalim, right? You say Hallel on Pesach, right? Right.
Because with our Sinai is not necessarily.
Yeah, sure. It's Chutz La'aretz. It's Chutz La'aretz. Sure. It's in Sinai. Sinai is not part of Eretz Yisrael.
It's not.
No, not the Gvul. It never was. It's not the Gvul of, well, though last week's Parsha says one of the borders Yam Suf, which is pretty hard to understand because that's not Kedushas Eretz Yisrael. Trumos and Maestros in that area is not considered halacha. Well, that's a whole big shaila if you have to keep in a lot.
Yeah.
It's a big shaila. There's so much literature on that one question of what is the status of a lot? Is a lot part of the Gvul of Eretz Yisrael? Bisman hazeh, many poskim say that it's part of Eretz Yisrael, but it's a big question because it's outside of the regular. Was this part of Yoshua's conquering of Eretz Yisrael? No, Ezra's part of it. So Yoshua was the first wave, and then Ezra came and he reconquered. Oh, huh? No.
Okay, but we don't want to give away anything that's not.
No. Right.
Posting would say that you would keep one day.
Yeah, I think so. I think, you would keep one day. Most poskim would say, don't be in a lot for the second day of Yom Tov. So, for Yom Tov, I could know a lot of better places to live than better places to visit than a lot, right? For numerous other reasons. But okay, yeah.
Rabbi
Okay.
Muskin,
So go ahead, please.
may I ask you a question?
I
Would-
can't hear
would-
you.
Can you hear me now?
Uh-oh.
Yeah. There's not-
Can you hear me now? No?
Okay, now I can hear you.
Okay. I'm just wondering if Pesach
They're
is
doing
not,
that in Rafi, you know
Yeah,
that.
they're lighting camp. They're having.
I hear
What
somebody
happened?
else.
Go ahead.
I'm wondering if Pesach would also be considered a limited victory because we say Vehisha Amda in the Haggadah.
Yeah, it is.
Also about-
Exactly. Yeah. We're always worried that it might happen again. 100%. 100%. I mean, it's a full victory, but that concern is expressed by Chazal. Yeah, until we have Yemot HaMashiach, that's the concern. And we're right. History has proven it
Right.
right over and over and over and over again. I mean, today, if there's any day we have to be reminded of it, it's today with those babies and their mother being buried. No, terrible, very sad day, a very sad day. And I don't know. You know what the Gemara says, by the way? The Gemara says in Bracha. We know the halacha is when you come to a Beit Zavel, you're supposed to be quiet, right? And let the Ovel speak. But Rabbi Soloveitchik always explained, because there's nothing to say. Nothing you're going to say, just your presence is what's important. There is no comfort here. Chacham and I were talking about that this morning. What comfort are you going to give? What comfort are you going to give Yardain?
None.
What comfort? What comfort are you going to give Klal Yisrael? I keep on saying, I said it on Shabbos, and I say it again. I can't look at those pictures. I can't look at the boys. When I saw them, they were so beautiful. They were beautiful. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave them such beauty. Such beauty. Yeah.
Big fear in Ariel.
And Shiri already, somebody in the community named their daughter Shiri.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
definitely.
They got
Yeah. Bezrat Hashem. I'll finish with one point. When Rabbi Beryl Wine tells the story. He says when he was a rabbi in Florida, in Miami, in the beginning of his rabbinate, he was a rabbi in Florida, and for a few years. And before then, he moved on to the OU and to the Muncie. So he met many of the real major rabbinic personalities would come during the winter to Florida. And one of them was Rav Kahneman from the Panovich Yeshiva. And he became very close to Rav Kahneman. And he would have this close of driving Rav Kahneman. He was a young rabbi in the shul in Miami. So he would drive Rav Kahneman around. So Rav Kahneman one day on one of his trips says, I want you to set up a meeting with all of your young balabatim. And at that time, he had a young shul, 30, I want the 20s, 30s, and 40s. I want that young age to, and Rabbi Wein says, Rabbi, they're not capable of giving money to the yeshiva. He says, just do what I asked you. I want to meet with and Rav Kahneman was a very strong personality and a charismatic personality. He says, Rabbi, I told you what I want. Can you please? And I want to do it in somebody's home. So choose the most popular home, set up a night, a tea night, whatever, and I'm coming to speak. Rabbi Wein goes, okay, but understand you're not going to raise money. Do what I ask. So Rav Kahneman, Rabbi Beryl Wein gets a home in Miami, a very popular home, and he announces there's a very special evening. Everybody should come. It'll be a very special, because it was in the popular home, it made it certainly feasible. And Rav Kahneman walks in and he says the following. He says, I'm not asking you for money. I don't need that from you. I need children. That's what I need from you. All you young couples have to take it upon yourself to replace all of the children that were killed in the Sifluid. That's all I want from you. I want you to rebuild our people. Have children. And Rabbi Beryl Wein says that by at the end of that year, it was unbelievable how many children I had bristim and I had namings of girls. They listened. Their chiyuv is to rebuild the people. Our chiyuv post, and I'm really feel that same way. Our chiyuv now is to rebuild all of the children that were killed.
No, I can't do that anymore.
Yeah, no, right, but the younger community can.
It's something that I saw online. They posted online how many babies have been born.
Yeah.
And they were saying that, that
Baruch Hashem.
The people in Israel took that upon themselves. That they
Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem. Yeah. Netzach Yisrael lo yishaper. That should be the nechama of all of this. And learning Esther right now is something right the nechama as well. Okay, so this is Perek Chet. Next week we'll continue on Esther. Okay, we'll have another shiur on Esther. Okay, Perek Chet. Okay, everybody should have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Together with this man that my mother